Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Psychology and Spirituality, a bridge to a better life discussion. I'm your host, Marcia Trajano, and with me today is my good friend, Peter Hayes. Peter is the president of the Spiritist group Love and Light in Newark, New Jersey. And he has done lectures on Spiritism all over the US. He has participated in several US Spiritist symposia. And he is also currently serving in the board of directors of the US Spiritist Federation, as well as being an active member of the Tri State Spiritist Federation, an active participant, I'm sorry. But if this is the first time that you're here watching this podcast like program, please note that our program, Psychology and Spirituality Weekly Talks, are based on the works by Joanna de Angelis, and it offers a safe space to confront, to compare, to correlate, and expand spirituality concepts from a psychological lens, bringing to you and to me actionable tips, insights, and perhaps some real world advice to help us lead a better life. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at the Spiritist group Love and Light. To know more about that organization, please visit www.loveandlightnj.org. Our program is sponsored by four organizations, and they are AME Brazil, the TV Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, and the International Spiritist Council. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't done so. And if you'd like to know more about what we're doing, please check us out at spiritist.us. And if you have any feedback, any comments, or any questions, write them down. We will try to address them, if not during our episode today, at a later time. So we appreciate any feedback. And as I'm here with you, Peter, I'd love to talk to you about this very interesting topic. Today, we're going to talk about good and evil. And as we were discussing previously, right, Peter,
Mhm.
historically, the concepts of good and evil, well, they've been found since the beginning of civilization. It is quite interesting to me to understand what's behind the origins of those concepts. We're here today maybe to explore about not only where those concepts were originated, the notions of what is good, what is evil, but also how those concepts impact psychology in general. But with that, Peter, hello, and thank you for being here with me.
Hi, Marcia. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Go ahead. Do you want to talk about good and evil? And
Well,
if you don't mind, Peter, just want to let you know that whenever we say good and evil, right? Good and evil, I don't know, Dark Vader or any of those epic mythological symbols that we used in our, in our day and age of beings that signify, that embody pure evil, right? It
right.
really is a battle like of mythic proportions.
Mhm.
Is that what we're going to be talking about today?
Well, Spiritism, which is made up originally of the five books of the codification, the Spirit's book, the Gospel according to Spiritism, the Medium's book, Heaven and Hell, and Genesis. The first book, first published in 1857, the Spirit's book, talks about our relationship to uh, selfishness and free will, but also, generally speaking, Spiritism really emphasizes
Mhm.
that none of us are hopelessly 100% evil. And that's a
Can we stop here just for a second, Peter? Because if you don't know what Spiritism is, right, it is a body of work considered both a religion, a philosophy, and actually a science as well. So there's a triad notion to it. And recently, right, if you think in terms of all the world religions, Spiritism is a baby being really pinpointed to its birth by the book that you're referring to in 1857, right?
right. So generally speaking, Spiritism does stress that none of us are hopelessly evil. We may
Mm-hmm.
behave very badly. People
Mm-hmm.
certainly engage in evil acts, but it also emphasizes that we are capable of changing and we all have the capacity. Um, the Spirits book, for those not familiar with it, is made up of over 1,000 questions that ask questions about all kinds of stuff, the nature of our existence in a variety of ways. And there's one part of it that talks about God's laws, natural law. And I really like question 621, I believe it is, which Joanna de Angelis mentions in her book, The Conscious Being. The question is, where are God's laws written? And the answer is in the consciousness. And what's fascinating is I think the implications of that is that the capacity for us to improve, to grow, to be capable of many beautiful and wonderful things is within us. But also, we have the capacity to do very destructive things. And when we talk about good and evil, which is a difficult and big subject, there's a lot of examples of how we are both. We have the goodness within us, we also have the evil within us. And when we talk about Star Wars and Darth Vader, they're these archetypes or these personifications. And
Mm-hmm.
another one would be that comes to mind is the Batman movie. I think it's called The Dark Knight, where Batman is up against the Joker. And it was, I think, the last movie Heath Ledger made before he passed, and he portrayed the Joker. And what's revealing about that portrayal is he seems rather unredeemably bad, but also he personifies the idea that we're bad for no particular reason other than we can. So I think there was a character Morgan Freeman plays in that movie where he says sometimes there are just people that want to see the world burn. So it's this very pessimistic view of humanity in which some people just don't care, have nothing to lose. Um, I think what's interesting is that those kinds of portrayals and maybe those kinds of archetypes
Yeah.
are important for us because we'd like to think, well, we don't do that. I hope to God I'm not like that. But we all have negativity within us, right? I mean, part of what psychology certainly emphasizes is if we work on ourselves, is to be more mindful that sometimes we have impulses and desires that are very irrational. And if we can learn not to be ashamed of that and be more aware of it, then we can not let that stuff control us so much. But it also has to do with negative impulses, violent impulses, evil impulses, the desire to hurt people.
Can I say something here, Peter? Because I love where you're going, but I also wanted to express how I speak of evil. And to me, it's very hard when you're talking about the Joker, right? There's somebody who is all evil. It is that individual that personifies everything that is wrong. And you mentioned irredeemable. And we bring here not only with spiritism, but many spiritualistic philosophies, the notion that no, we all have a soul that doesn't die. It's an immortal soul.
Mhm.
And that implies the fact that with reincarnations of a notion of various, well, one life, but various existence,
Mhm.
that even the person that spent an entire existence just hurting himself, herself, and others are
Right.
really going to be redeemed as time goes by. So the notion, and Joanna does this beautifully when
Mhm.
she says we are fated. There is one uh, destiny for all of us, which is infinite happiness.
Mhm. Yes.
We're not
Yeah.
there yet, but we are all going and working. There's nothing that will impede us forever from reaching that state of infinite happiness. But happiness, and I think you're going to be talking about it,
Mhm.
means a lot of work on ourselves. And
Right.
I love what you're going here in your conversation, because it brings us the idea that no, we're not only evil or even all good. We
Mhm.
are that mix, because we are in progress,
Right.
creatures becoming a pure or a purer or less contaminated being, until we are diluted, like dilapidated. We are really taking away all of the impurities that we bring from our lack of knowledge in our progressive existence. And I love that idea that to me is evil simply the ability to hurt,
Yes. The ability
right?
to hurt, because when we talk
To
about,
cause pain, right? Peter, sorry to interrupt you, but to cause pain. I hurt because I
okay,
cause pain. And who do I cause pain to myself.
so
Mostly, we are our worst enemies, but I also cause pain to the other because we don't even know that we are causing pain, right? It's in the periphery of our consciousness.
yeah.
But go ahead, Peter. I sorry I interrupted you.
Um, I heard it put this way one time, which
Mhm.
I thought, and this always stayed with me. If we go back to the cave period, say the time of Neanderthals or what have you, 2 million years ago or even before, if a human being back then was angry, their first impulse might be just to kill somebody.
Mhm.
Evolution has tempered those impulses. And as societies developed, as laws were put into place, as we began to see consequences to our behaviors, the Ten Commandments, the laws in Deuteronomy are one example. Joanna
Mhm.
mentions the code of, is it Hammurabi of the Babylonian
Yes,
King?
yeah.
So that, and those are very tough laws. I happen to have the book. If you want, I could read one at some point. But it's
Mhm.
very much, if you speak, if you slander somebody and you're wrong, you die. You will be put to death. Really draconian type responses. And you can imagine that the purpose of that, whether you agree with it or not, was to really set very strong boundaries with people to try to control behavior. And as societies have developed, we've also evolved enough that we've learned how to temper some of those more animal like impulses because
Mhm.
we come from an animal like background. Going back to Spiritism, one of the things it talks about is the soul is born simple and ignorant. You could add
Correct.
animalistic too, right?
Mhm.
And animals operate on what? Instinct, and usually self-protective measures. But we're more complex because we not only have those instincts and those impulsive urges, but we have the ability to think and to develop free will and make all kinds of complicated decisions. So our relationship to our animal-like selves is such that we have that, but we also have the ability to work on tempering any really violent impulses we might have, or hurtful impulses. When you mentioned, that evil's the desire to hurt, for instance, if I quoted
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
And what I find quite interesting, right? There's so many different aspects of this subject that we can go into, but
right.
one of them that comes to my mind is the idea that while we continue to behave as, and this is immersion in our society currently, right? We are a fruit, we are a result of um, individualistic society,
Hmm.
Western society, right? The
Right.
society of this millennia is one that signifies capitalist production
Hmm.
biased, and those production can be of goods, of services, or even intellectual property. You know this. You work with writing, so you know how we are somehow imprisoned by the idea that we're only as good in this society as we can produce something.
Right. Do you think
And
that's bad? That
no, it's just what we are today. And I do believe that we're going to evolve to
right.
different types of societies, just like, what we were in warring tribes or clans in evolving into, agrarian societies, aristocracy, so on and so forth. This is what we are, but many call today man is really in this fight, this combat, this internal, who am I, why am I here, and what are those impulses that I still carry with me. And because of that, we end up perhaps
Mhm.
using, and I'm using my hand in my face, the masks, according to Gustav Jung, right? We
Right.
create those masks to become the embodiment of a persona that will help me protect me, because it all goes back to what you're saying, Peter.
Yeah.
It's we're here coming from an evolutionary path that was very much very animalistic, right? Or still a preservation of our instinct, a preservation to our well-being, to our lives. And hint hint, we don't live in the savannas, the African savannas anymore. There are no lionesses hunting us, right? We don't, but we still have the same instinct to protect who we are. Who are we protecting? We're protecting an image. We're protecting that persona that we created, and that's what is really interesting in this discussion about good and evil,
Yeah.
because it is, why are we uh, reacting to an aggression, a seeming aggression to my ego, when what's important is myself, my spirit, right?
Well, what do you think? Is it true that one of our biggest struggles is that
Mhm.
we have a big egocentric heritage from which we
Yes,
come from?
yes.
I was thinking as you were talking about how, like, when you have a 2-year-old
Mhm.
child, uh, and the 2-year-old has like a ball, and they're being encouraged to give it to somebody for a moment. Well, the 2-year-old child may not want to do that because how do they know they're going to get the ball back? Right. Well, on some level, do we still carry those types of desires, somewhat egocentric desires? Because, as you know, when someone is 2 years old, the world is all about them. They're not
Yeah,
really capable of seeing a
yeah,
perspective than their own. They're not developed enough for that. But how many of us have these egocentric type impulses well into adulthood where
yeah.
we kind of get territorial about things? Um, maybe, well, certainly competitive, jealous, envious, and all that stuff. And
And we have to talk, right, Peter? Is this, can we even judge this as a good behavior or bad behavior? Because when we talk about our egocentric, remember you mentioned based on Spiritist book,
right,
right? The root of where we are today, of our suffering, our pains, really the root cause of it all are based on our self-centered
so
tendencies, right? And our pride. And if you break down further, it's really pride as in that illusion created by your ego, those personas where you project something that, boy, we want to protect because you want to be the best. And you want to be the best because you want to meet the demands of the external world. And you want to meet the demands of the external world because we are born and raised and educated and created in a very materialistic environment that push us to do that. In our ego, another hint to all of us, and I'm joking here, but
mhm.
our ego is not a bad thing. We should,
No,
right, we should think like, well, I'm going to kill my ego, I'm
no,
going
no,
to take away, and yet no, it's the center of our consciousness.
right.
And the issue here is that it is a very small part of who we are,
It's a
right?
small part of who we are. I mean, we need ego enough to be able to function. If we had no ego
Correct.
at all, so to speak, we wouldn't
Mhm.
have any drive. And
Mhm.
having drive and a sense of, well, wanting to protect ourselves some of the time, that's a perfectly rational and valid impulse to have. It's when it gets distorted and it's out of alignment that we get ourselves into
And
trouble.
there's, yeah, and there's another component, right, Peter, if you start thinking about it, okay, it's there, we have your personas, and you're creating this personality called Peter Hayes, and he happens to be a man, and he happens to be American, he happens to be, ooh la la, president of this organization, a board member of other organization. He's a very respectful dude, and I'm joking here, but all of it is your accomplishments in the environment that you have. They are not who you truly are.
Correct.
But forgetting that idea, if we push the component of that structure that you work for, and you have a if you will, a goal, right? This is what I want to achieve, because you want to to have a sense of accomplishment. So we have those goals, and you work really hard, and you devote, and you study, and you do things, and you do all of it. And to do that, now you start to create filters, and
Mhm.
those filters are really to protect again that persona.
A mask.
Peter, yeah, the mask, right? The Peter, and I'm just sorry for joking with you, Peter, but Peter, the president of this organization, has a set of behaviors that
Mhm.
may not be the Peter that goes in a car and he's driving and somebody cuts him off and he gets really angry and he loses control.
Right,
Maybe two different Peters. But the
right.
fact of the matter is, when we start to understand that and I'm going to call it, and it's not the right word, but I'm going to call it anyway, this ecosystem that we create, our, you mentioned, our atavistic or our archetypal heritage that we bring with us, unconsciously speaking. Those are the collective unconscious, right? We bring with us without even knowing, and it's all there in addition to all that inheritance from our
Mhm.
prior existence, that is all here with me, all the multitude of pain that I either suffered or make somebody else suffer. All of this
Mhm.
is my, and I put my hands in the back, right? It's what I bring with me. And today I'm the president of this organization, and I need to be very much this type of person that I think portrays what I need to be.
Yeah.
And when anger, or fear, sadness, and we're talking about the basic emotions, right? Come in because you're a human being. You're
Right.
living, you're learning, you have response to things to you when they come, and we try to repress, and now we have a whole nother world, which is your shadow, your all your repressed emotions and reactions, because no, 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 I cannot be that. And I just thought that would be really good for us to talk in the next few minutes about that sense of awareness of the duality that exists with us, called good and evil, that is really part of who we are as
Okay.
one unit.
So there's a lot I can think of to respond to, but uh, as you mentioned, I'm the president of a Spiritist center. If you're
Mhm.
not familiar with what a Spiritist center is, a Spiritist center is a place where people often get together primarily to study. Usually, the Spiritist books that we mention, we keep saying Joanna de Angelis, her works. People will study the works of many others as well. And the whole point of the study is to deepen our awareness about the nature of our existence and to ask all kinds of questions about who we are. And there's no such thing as a forbidden question, question everything. So that's one of the things Spiritist centers do. Spiritist centers engage in having presentations, lectures, Spiritist talks on a variety of topics, and people will receive passes at a Spiritist center, which is a laying on of hands. And Spiritist centers, to raise money, will sell food or books, and um, and those are the major activities. Sometimes they're involved in doing outreach, like they may go visit nursing homes, or there's educational programs for children and so forth. So that's what a Spiritist center is, and I'm the president of one. And I was thinking, as the big bad president of the Spiritist Center, I think a good creed for any Spiritist center is the idea that none of us are saints.
Love
Because,
it. Yes.
right, the reason is going back to what you were saying about the persona. Yes, we have to treat one another with respect. Our behavior does matter. We have to be mindful about that. Spiritism emphasizes having charity towards one another, charity in our thoughts and our intentions. But that doesn't mean we have to come across like we're perfect and always serene and always calm and never have any faults and all that. That's when we're not being honest. And that's
Mhm.
when we're wearing a mask. Um, a lot of times the impulse to wear a mask probably has a lot to do with shame, fear, has a lot to do with not appearing anything less than strong and always
Which
in
is a
charge.
reflection, which is, by the way, it's a reflection of our society today, and perhaps a bit of what we inherited, right?
Right.
So, mhm.
Yeah, and going back to what you were saying before about society has certain images of like the successful person or the upstanding person, the one who produces in some way. um, if we are focused too much on the image of what we think is an upstanding individual, are we inviting the possibility of wearing a big mask in the process? It's not that trying to be successful is wrong. It's not that, for instance, in being involved in earning a living is bad by any means. Back Going back to Spiritism, the Spiritist book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, does talk a lot about our relationship with money,
Mhm.
and that money is neither bad nor good. It's neutral. It's what
Mhm.
we do with money. And part of our trials that we go through, what we learn through life, is how to handle the relationship we have with money. And I mention this because if we think about the mask that we wear, if we live in a society in which one's social position seems to be very important, then we may tend to judge ourselves and one another according to what social position we have or don't have, is one thing. Certainly, people will judge one another based upon how they are financially. Do you think that's true?
I do. I was actually thinking about um, the book that you know quite well. You and I uh, met several occasions to talk about, study this book, Empty Lives,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Where this book, which was, I believe, first published in 2020, right, just like a day before
And
the World Health Organization declared the pandemic. And it's very interesting because it's all about, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, we are all collectively speaking living empty lives. And when we read the book, and in the beginning it has a little bit of that apocalyptic vision, right?
mhm,
Oh, we are here and we have access to the technological tools, and we have such advanced healthcare, and we have all of this.
mhm,
And if we look at ourselves, we really feel like we're living empty lives.
mhm,
And when I think about it, Peter, I also think about one of the aspects of a materialistic existence, which you're referring to with a title or position or money.
right.
But Joanna de Angelis, in that book and other books as well, she talks about this materialism not as it's bad to live in a world that is material. In essence, this is what we are, right? We are here for a reason.
Right.
But what she talks about is the terrible, if I may so, mistake that we have in identifying ourselves
Mhm,
with what is in essence ephemeral. And it's a
correct.
very interesting concept because we live this life and we do everything. We spend all of our energies, and I when I talk about energy, I talk about and no judgment here, but we go through cosmetic surgeries. We do our hair. We use makeup, we do whatever, we go to the gym to maintain youthfulness that we know it's not going to last. But
Right.
it's this incredible investment to immortalize what is mortal in essence, right?
Right.
And at the same time, we lose sight of not, and that's the problem, of not investing our energy, our time in what's immortal by itself, our spirit, our existence that is immortal. So I
Right.
find it very interesting because she breaks that problem into so many different angles. But if
Mhm,
I go back to the idea of good and evil, what we see is it's the sense of there is no such a thing as good and evil, because no one, until we get to that end of the scale of perfect happiness,
mhm,
is not completely good or evil, because we in our inside, right, psychologically speaking, we're
mhm,
bringing fragmentations of our past, that inheritance that we bring, that archetypical inheritance that she talks about, that is part of our collective and unconscious, and is projected in our shadow, which is a repression of our contempt to certain things that is in our nature,
right.
to that will go against that mask. It's a huge package, isn't it?
Well, because Joanna de Angelis and other Spiritist authors certainly emphasize that the soul's immortal, the soul is therefore in a process, a very long process of learning. And everything we go through in life is an opportunity to learn. And that includes our relationship with the material. Because I don't think Spiritism or is saying the material is bad at all.
Mhm.
What it's saying is, what is the relationship we have with the material? So when we talk about social positions, we worry about our looks and we're worrying about things that we can't hang on to. It's not that, wanting to look nice is wrong per se, but if we're defining our sense of self based upon how we look or
Absolutely.
we have, and we're miserable if we don't achieve some standard that we think we should be achieving, then one of the things we're doing is we're projecting our own anxiety onto ourselves, but also with the world at large. And when we wrap ourselves up in worrying about things that are not going to last, and we're
Yes.
miserable when we don't have what we think we should have, then it's certainly then the focus is wrong, and it's losing sight of how to use everything we have as a tool. And one of the things I like about Spiritism in general is that it emphasizes that we have the gifts that we have from God, whether it's emotional gifts, material gifts, however you define a gift. And a lot of it, if it's emotional, it's stuff we can retain. If it's material, we can't hang on to it forever. But the material are all tools that we can use in which to learn a great deal from. And so it's fine. But going back to good and evil, part of what gets us into a lot of trouble is when we become very selfish, as you mentioned before, then we're trying to act out of a more egocentric attitude, and we're operating in a very selfish way, which then causes us to try to hang on to things that we can't hang on to, or it may cause us to not have any real compassion for our fellow human beings at all. And when we don't have that compassion, then it's not that we're never going to grow or prosper in some way or progress spiritually, but we certainly can be at a standstill for quite a while until we move beyond that.
Yes. What comes to my mind here, Peter, is the duality, the sense of duality. Can you speak a little bit about more when specifically when Joanna de Angelis talks about good and evil, and she brings that front and center, right? That sense of duality. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about it? Of what is that and how maybe it's expressed in Joanna de Angelis' work, right? Because it's a theme that she brings over and over again.
Well, in her book, The Conscious Being, Chapter 6, which is
Hmm.
called Conditionings, she opens with a section on good and evil, which is what
Hmm.
we're talking about. And
Uh-huh.
she talks about our relationship with uh, the good and evil. And she mentions duality. So, good and evil, yin and yang is another example of duality, or God and Lucifer is another example of duality. And when I first started reading that, I was thinking about, okay, is duality really necessary? Do we have to have duality? And I think certainly in the beginning stages of our evolutionary progress, our spiritual progress, yes, we do.
Hmm.
And I say that because there's duality and there's also non-duality, right? A spiritual concept, which I'm not an expert on by any means, but I think part of what non-duality is to sort of transcend this notion of right and wrong, good, bad, black, white, that things are a lot more subtle than that ultimately. But at our level, that's hard to really grasp that. I mean, some people can begin to at least. But when we talk about duality, um, it helps us in terms of progressing spiritually to struggle with notions of good and evil, right behavior, wrong behavior, however you want to describe it, because we have to learn through the process of trial and error, so to speak. So if
Yes.
we behave badly and then we go through the consequences of it, then we will hopefully learn. It may take a while before we learn because we may be very stubborn.
Hmm.
Rebelliousness is another thing that holds us back a great deal. But but as we struggle with duality in the terms of good behavior, bad behavior, which is very much rooted in a combination of a selfish impulse, but also having free will. And we're blessed with both, really, because that helps us to learn a great deal as we are trying to overcome selfishness. Hopefully, we're using our free will wisely. Sometimes when we use our free will, of course, it's not about a selfish act or not. We just may be using our free will, trying to figure things out. What do I do here? What do I do there?
Correct. Uh-huh.
Or we may make the right decision,
Yeah.
but we
I
learn.
yeah, I love this that idea of a tapestry, right? Nobody has this destiny that's already made, but
Yes.
we're giving the colors, and if you think in terms of yarns, that we with our free will then, right, as a textile, we weave through using our free will the design, the colors, the ultimate what it is that we're going to be doing in this existence. And but it's all our choice, right?
Mhm.
There is no right or wrong. It's what
Correct.
we do.
Yes, because Joanna de Angelis mentions that when we talk about the good trying to transcend evil, which is, I think we can agree that's what we need to learn. Uh,
Hmm.
that means developing our morality. And the way to develop our morality is to use our will. We start to have consciousness about behaviors that are more compassionate, more loving, kindness, charitable. And if we're struggling against selfish impulses, rather than hate ourselves for having those selfish impulses, excuse me, can we use our will sometimes maybe to resist certain temptations? So if we have a selfish temptation to steal from somebody, can we use our will not to do that? Or we have various emotional or physical desires that may get us into trouble with people if they go unchecked in some way. Can we use our will to try to temper some of those desires so that we get to a point where maybe those impulses are not so important anymore?
Yeah,
You know,
and I keep thinking, and we're very close to the end of our conversation here, Peter. So first of all, I want to say thank you for enlightening us with your experience, with your learnings about Spiritism, and how Joanna in this book that you're referring to, the conscious being, specifically chapter 6, that brings to light Joanna's works or words on good and evil. How do we define what we do every day in this duality that is part of our mythology, if you will? It's part of how we grow through, we go through life with good and bad, yin and yang, et cetera, right? That
right.
polarizing force that
Mhm.
will then become that conduit by what we do and how we do it, or even why we do certain things.
Right.
But with that, Peter, I just wanted to invite you to perhaps give your final thoughts about this subject so that we conclude then our episode today.
Okay. I think at the end of the day, if I may be so bold, the main purpose of why we're here is to learn. And when we talk about good and evil, right versus wrong and so forth. We all need to navigate our way through these choices, and we do have the capacity to make choices. Again, I love the that quote, this question 621 in the Spirits book, which I believe Joanna de Angelis makes reference to in this book, not in chapter 6, but that God's laws are written in the conscience. And what I read from that is that we've been given the capacity to develop our intelligence, develop our free will, develop our morality, develop our uh, capacity for creativity, all kinds of capabilities. But we are that seed that has the ability to grow into a beautiful tree or a flower of some kind. And because of that, the process of getting there can be a slow one, but we are given the equipment that we need in order to develop a healthy relationship it, with duality. So, again, I'm not an expert on yin and yang, for instance, but it's not necessarily bad or good, but that we live with opposites. We try to find a harmonious balance between opposites, and often we need opposites because opposites complement each other: the masculine, the feminine, the dry and wet, and many other ideas, good and bad, um, the practical versus the creative, or however you want to define it. But all of this is stuff that we have the capacity to incorporate into our very being. And I think also part of the important thing to keep in mind is, as we go through this process, which can be very complicated, that we also are compassionate with ourselves in the process. We take
Absolutely.
personal responsibility. We don't make excuses when we need to change our behavior, but at the same time, we are allowed to make mistakes because we're going to make them over and over and over and over again. And there's no law that says we have to get everything right, and we won't. So, can we accept ourselves for being in the middle of this messy process? Because despite how things seem in the moment, things may be very chaotic. Maybe things are relatively quiet and going well for the moment, but it may change. And can we navigate whatever moment we're going through as we go through it, and learn to develop self love in the process, which is another uh, theme in this chapter 6 from the conscious being, is what does it mean to have self love? Part of having self love is to accept the reality that we're in.
Absolutely. I'm going
That
to say, yeah, go
sometimes
ahead.
it's
Sorry.
so important that we're able to be able to, well, try to be more at peace with where we really are, but
I love
also
it.
accountable at the same time.
Yes. Yes, I love how you pack that the whole idea of understanding the duality that we live in, good and bad, good and evil, so on and so forth, come to terms through self-love, self-compassion, that in our process, which is ultimately the process of individuation of
Yes.
your ego, yourself, is to understand the multifaceted aspects of who we are,
Mhm.
and that there is no judgment beyond our own conscience, right? So we are the ones who are going to really set ourselves free by understanding all that we bring with us, and how in the end, in that path toward perfect happiness,
Mhm.
it includes accepting all that we learn, and in
Mhm.
the process of learning, all that we have have fallen prey to in terms of mistakes or misdeeds or chaotic thinking, chaotic behavior. All in all, let's be gentle, let's be kind to ourselves, right, Peter?
Right.
But with that, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank
We're going to meet again soon. And I hope everyone who's here with us today can also be with us in the next episode. Thank you, everyone, very much.
thank you. Have a wonderful day or evening, whatever it is for you.